Greetings, students. This will be your audio recording for chapter 5, which is on emotions. To begin, you can open your textbook to page 139. And after reading this and doing your summary and listening to this recording, these are some things that ideally would be great if you could integrate. One is to describe how the 4 components of emotions affect the way you feel and hence your communication in an important situation. Next, describe how the influences on emotional expression have affected your communication in an important relationship. So hopefully you can address that in your summary. The third objective is to apply the guidelines for effectively communicating emotions in an important situation. Again, I hope you'll deal with that in your summary. And 4, identify and dispute the fallacies that are creating debilitative emotions in an important situation, and explain how more rational thinking can lead to more constructive communication. All right, with that, let's go to the chapter. Okay, chapter 5. Okay, so these are the things that we will talk about: debilitative emotions, emotional contagion, emotional intelligence, emotional labor, facilitative emotions. There are 7 fallacies, and reappraisal, rumination, and self-talk. So the main features that we will unpack are emotional intelligence, the influences on emotional expression, the guidelines, facilitative and debilitative emotions, and irrational and emotional fallacies. Okay, there are 6 primary emotions. I'm going to let you look at the film clip. It is on Inside Out. Okay, so I just wanted to click that so you could see it. It's on Inside Out, but I'm going to let you pause this and watch that. So surprise, joy, disgust, anger, fear, and sadness. So you might ask yourself, really, only that many? But if you look in your book, there's a really nice table of a lot of different emotions, or not emotions, but expressions. And they all tend to fall into these categories. So these are really more like categories, but you actually can enrich your ability to describe emotions by expanding your emotional vocabulary. And so you'll see that. Okay. Emotion, it is an intense reaction that is, 1, triggered by outside events. 2nd, involves physiological arousal. 3rdly, determined by awareness and labeling. And 4th, governed by pre-existing norms. And 5th, reflected in verbal and nonverbal ways. What are the physiological factors? Well, when you're emotional, your heart might race, your blood pressure goes up, you might release adrenaline, which dilates your pupils, you might tense your jaw, you might have stomach issues. It's also known as flooding. Okay, so if you're familiar with being triggered, okay, if you really are, I mean, people use the word triggered a lot, but if you really are, legit triggered, you're flooding. You're definitely getting flooded, okay, with physiological factors. It is debilitative, and we will discuss more about what we mean by debilitative a little bit later. And awareness of these cues. So in these physiological factors, you want to increase your ability to become very aware of these cues, okay? 2nd, nonverbal reaction. So this idea of emotions having a bi-directional relationship. So emotions are manifested in the body, okay, in body language, and body language can generate emotion. So what does that mean? Bi-directional means that the emotion, the trigger, can manifest because of your brain releasing certain chemicals by neurochemistry, like adrenaline. Okay, so this is this one right here. No, it's sorry. Emotions are manifested in body language. So this idea that what you're doing with your body informs your brain. So what when you got flooded, what do you think the first thing, the first series, like domino effect, right? The first thing in the series that happened is probably tension in your body, okay? You are perceiving a threat in the environment, right? And so your body tenses, and then it informs your brain, there is a problem, please send support. And the way your body sends support may not really feel like support because of what's going on in all three of these areas, right? So the idea is that you can manifest emotions because of your body, what you're physically doing with your body, okay? And you can generate emotions from the brain, and then your body can tense. All right, so that's what's meant by a bidirectional relationship, from the brain or from the body to the brain. So from the brain to the body, and then the body has a reaction, or from the body is tensing and it's informing the brain, and then the brain sends out the chemistry for the emotion. Emotional intelligence, its initials are EQ. Hold on, sorry about that. Okay. Its initials are EQ. It's the ability to interpret your own and others' emotions accurately. Okay. Again, there's a film clip. These are all, I believe, because I watched them recently. Yeah, so they're all from Inside Out. Emotionally intelligent people. So when we are emotionally intelligent, we can understand our own emotions. We can possess empathy, which again is another Inside Out clip. They're all very brief, but they all show exactly what this is talking about. And we can constructively manage our emotions. We can harness our emotional states in positive ways. That's a lot. So that's the film clips will help understand all that. And it takes definitely conscious desire to possess emotional intelligence. It doesn't just happen naturally and without work. Okay. What are some influential factors on our emotions? So gender. It is generally true that people who identify as male do more masking, and that is what is really influenced on our culture, right? Females tend to do less masking. It's like, I talked about this, I think on chapter 3, it's like when we're little kids, and a boy child falls down, right? And their parents will say, or any other adults in their life will say, oh, just get up and brush it off. A female child will fall down and skin their knee, right? And the talk will be, her crying will be much more accepted. She'll be probably coddled more and babied more, and the crying is much more acceptable. And just because those are trends and prevailing perceptions in our culture does not mean that we have to raise our own kids that way, or that we were raised that way, right? That just means it's the prevailing values in the culture. Okay, so social conventions. 1, positive expressions are more acceptable. That's true, right? And then number 2, emotional labor. So it's this idea of management and suppression of your emotions in your work life, and it's encouraged that you don't express your emotions at work. But I want to expand this concept of emotional labor, because it goes beyond that, and I think it's helpful to apply emotional labor, or your understanding of it, outside of work as well. So the idea of emotional labor, it's this idea that you have to manage your emotions because of something else or somebody else. So yes, for work life, it's expected you're going to manage your emotions and suppress them. But I want you to think about the people you interact with. and start asking yourself if some people that you interact with sort of require you to use emotional labor. It's something to think about, something you can write about too if you want to in your summary. But all around you, I'm going to kind of leave it really open-ended and broad, but I want you to be thinking about the definition of emotional labor and whether or not maybe you have to do some emotional, what I call emotional heavy lifting in certain circumstances with certain people, and maybe they have to do it with you as well. So that's just something to understand because it definitely is an influential factor in how emotions affect your ability to communicate. Social media, of course, is an influential factor, right? And then there's this concept of emotional contagion. So recall an experience of being around a calm person or people. You know, someone who just has a tendency to be really chill. Think about that time you heard yourself say, it is so good to be in your presence right now. Because that person's so chill. And because they are so chill, you're feeling chill, right? So a calm person or people, so their emotional state is rubbing off on you. By the same token, this idea of being around someone who's very excitable can also rub off on you. And then in turn, you're feeling very excited. Maybe let's use anxiety as an example. So this person is very, very anxious. And when you're in the presence of that person, you too start to feel anxious. That's emotional contagion. Okay, this idea of debilitative and facilitative emotions. I'm going to, give me a second, because I'm going to get to that page in our book. Okay, so there's emotional contagion. I think I'm going to talk, before I get to debilitative and facilitative, I'm going to talk about some things in your book that are in order before we get there, just because they're in order, that's why. So your book also talks about guidelines, which I hope you will summarize in your summaries. Guidelines for expressing your emotions, very, very important. Anytime your book has guidelines, these are the take-home messages. These are the things that we want to put into practice as soon as we can and count those as tools in your toolbox, right? So first of all, recognizing your feelings. That is why your book is giving you definitions for the main feelings, right? So this idea of recognizing your own feelings. The very first line says, answering the question, how do I feel? That is huge in terms of your emotional intelligence, okay? Is this ability to understand not only that you're having a feeling, what is the feeling, okay? Next is to recognize the difference between feeling, talking, and acting, right? Just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean you must always talk about it. We know people, and sometimes we are those people that talk about absolutely everything we think and feel. But know the difference between when you actually need to talk about a feeling and act on it, and when you don't. That kind of goes back to my example of pillow talk in the previous chapter, the pillow method. Another important aspect that I talked about or I hinted at in the very beginning of this discussion was to expand your emotional vocabulary. So a lot of us suffer from what your book talks about as impoverished emotional vocabularies. Impoverished, meaning just very, very deficient. And so your book talks about, it says, ask someone how they're feeling, and the responses will almost always include the same terms, good or bad, terrible or great, and so on. But take a moment and look at table 5.1, and you'll see that there's a lot more choices to expand. So just to say good or bad is very no way to really understand what good means or bad means. It's way too general and broad. Okay, so expand your emotional vocabulary with the beautiful table that's on page 154, right? Also understand that you or somebody else may be sharing multiple feelings. It's possible to feel more than one thing, right? And so take a deep dive into that in your book, and also consider when and where to express your feelings. That is definitely a sign of somebody with emotional intelligence. And that does go back to the story I told in chapter 4 about my boss who was micromanaging me. And for me to go home and consider when and where to express my feelings. And even I think you should put the words if in there, if it is even important to express your feelings. Okay. But definitely, if you're going to express your feelings, because it is very important to be able to do that, timing is everything. So when somebody wants to talk to me about, if someone approaches me and says, I need to really talk to you about something, I often will say to them, now, I not often, but I will say it if it's true, now is not the best time to have an important conversation with me. I'm tired. It's been a long day. Usually the person who gets this line from me is my daughter, because when I get home from work at the end of the day, when I was teaching in the classroom, which I will be again one day soon, I would get home at 9:30 at night, 10 o'clock, and my daughter would want to tell me all about her day. And I would have to say to her, honey, I'm so sorry, but can you give me like 20 minutes to just sit down and chill and really be ready to listen to you? So this idea of considering when and where to express your feelings, when you need to talk to somebody about something important, that formulate a line. What I usually will say to somebody is, I need to have an important conversation with you. Is now a good time, or would later be better? Can we do you want to postpone this till later? Always try to give people the opportunity. Don't just spring your information on them like a trap, okay? Because that's what it'll feel like to somebody who's not prepared. So it's really fair to help people get prepared for a difficult or important conversation. Okay, so that is that idea. Making sure that when you have to express your emotions to somebody, that you don't don't just open up the can and, I call that having an emotional yard sale, right? Where just everything, when you go to a yard sale, there's just stuff everywhere. Okay, so that's not the most appropriate way to express our emotions. It's not a very effective communication style either. It's much better to avoid having an emotional yard sale and set up a time for talking in an intelligent way. So I think you get it. Also, on page 157, another recommendation is to accept responsibility for your feelings. So if you're having a really strong feeling about something, it doesn't automatically make the person who you're having that feeling about wrong. So think about that. If you're having an emotional aspect, okay, that was seemingly triggered by another person, it doesn't necessarily mean that person caused it. Okay. But it doesn't mean they didn't cause it, right? But you have to just kind of ask yourself, like, like I know I have strong feelings about certain things and I might be upset about what someone said, but it's not necessarily their fault. It's more about me taking responsibility for the fact that I have strong feelings about certain things. So again, all of these things are things that take years to work on and years to integrate into your emotional intelligence. Okay, but all of them, when you try them, what you realize is how much more satisfaction you get out of relationships interpersonally when you do them. But they take years to do. So all the anecdotes that I share with my students about things that I put into practice, they take years to do. That's all I'm going to say. But you try them and you do them little by little by little, and they build over time. And then you're able to tell anecdotal stories like I am. All right, so moving on to debilitative and facilitative emotions. It starts on the bottom of 158. Okay. All right. So facilitative and debilitative emotions. Okay, one main difference between facilitative emotions and debilitative emotions is intensity. Facilitative emotions contribute to effective functioning, while debilitative emotions hinder or prevent effective performance. So, for example, irritation or slight anger can decrease performance of a person. However, if this emotion intensifies, it turns into rage, which is often destructive. Okay, so we all get irritated. We all can be slightly angry. Okay, but the going back to the key word intensity up here, okay, the more intense it gets, the more debilitative it is, which means basically no matter if you're having intense emotions, you're not likely to be effective. Okay, the debilitating means almost like they're handicapped, it's handicapping you. Intense emotions handicap you, whereas managing your emotions helps you facilitate. Okay, you're facilitating your emotions. Okay. So what that leads to is once you understand, okay, your book has some really good information about facilitative and debilitative emotions. For example, the term rumination. So, and that's linked to intensity and duration, which then creates debilitation of your emotions. Okay. So this idea of rumination is when you're having a negative emotion and you just keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. Okay, so that's how you create intensity and duration, which then turns into debilitation. So these are important, okay, these logical fallacies on page 164. Okay, and they're very nicely explained in your book. Okay. Okay. So they start on the bottom of page 164. The first one is the fallacy of perception. Okay. People who accept the fallacy of perfection believe that a worthwhile communicator should be able to handle every situation with complete confidence and skill. So for me, this is a perfect one for me to give you an anecdote because I graduated from UC Davis with a degree in communication. And my mind would like to think, and I think even my students think, that I should be a very, very, very good communicator. And I can be. And I think I'm demonstrating that to you very often just through my experiences. However, I'm still very human. And like everybody, I'm affected by my past, by my environment, by what happened that day, by all kinds of things. So I have to remind myself because sometimes I do tell myself, I could have done that better. I should have communicated better because I know better, right? But that really takes away my humanity, which I should be allowed to have, right? The second one is fallacy of approval. So the truth is, we all like approval. Okay, it started very young when we were kids, needing our parents' approval. But we all know someone, and sometimes we've been that person that needs approval so badly that they won't make their own decisions and choices, right? And so we definitely need to become aware of to what degree do we need approval. Then C is the fallacy of shoulds, right? This is this inability to distinguish between what is and what should be. It really just creates unnecessary dissatisfaction with life. And I do mean unnecessary. Okay, so look at the examples in your book. I'll just give one. There should be no rain on weekends. Ha ha ha, right? That it's a bummer if you have plans and it rains on your plans. But if you really get pretty deep in the shoulds, it's just a way to manufacture misery, right? So it's good to know those things. It's good to recognize when you're in them too, and say to yourself, yeah, can't really do anything about this. So I can be miserable, or I can accept the thing the way it is and move on, right? So I don't have to get stuck in the fallacy of the shoulds. Overgeneralization, right? So the fallacy of overgeneralization, there's two types. First is It occurs when we base a belief on a limited amount of evidence. So for instance, how many times have you found yourself saying something like, I'm so stupid, I can't even figure out how to download music on my phone, right? That's just silly. You're not stupid, right? Or some friend, I forgot my best friend's birthday. Yeah, you probably feel bad about that, right? But you're human. What was going on? What's been going on lately that caused you to forget? Okay, you're just human. You can make it up. You can make up for it. The second one is let's see, where is the second one? Okay, in case the second one is absolute statements like there are almost always false and usually lead to discouragement or anger. So you'll feel far better when you replace overgeneralizations with more accurate messages to yourself and others. Like, um, so you often don't listen to me, right? Well, that might not be true, right? So a lot of times we're overgeneralizing at someone else. And then the next one is causation, which is based on the irrational belief that emotions are caused by others rather than by your own self-talk. Okay, so I know that that one can be tricky, right? Because people can be pretty mean to us. And, if they hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have felt that, right? So, but in the end, the way I like to explain it is in the end, it's still yours. Even though maybe you got triggered by someone and someone was unkind, um, in the end, it came from within you. It's still yours. And so, unfortunately, a series of events may have come to pass that you did not set into motion and they hurt you. But unfortunately, it's still yours to try and try to manage, right? So the more we get stuck in the causation part, we just go in circles. And if we can't get ourselves out of that causation aspect and realize that it's only me that can bring my emotions back into balance, then we're just, again, manufacturing misery, right? All right, so the next one is helplessness, okay? So it suggests that satisfaction in life is determined by forces beyond your control. All right, so it's kind of the victim aspect, right? Statements like, there's no way a woman can get ahead in this society. It's a man's world, and the best thing I can do is accept it. So yeah, just that idea of that you're helpless over situations, right? I'm sure we can find some part of ourselves in all of these. The last one is fallacy of catastrophic events, right? So this happens when they operate on the assumption that if something bad can possibly happen, it will. Okay. So an example would be, if I invite them to the party, they probably won't come. Okay. So I know catastrophic makes it seem really big compared to the example. But that's just the name of the fallacy, right? Is just that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. So again, when we can bring more awareness to these fallacies, we can have a lot less misery, right? Because we can bring our emotions, our awareness to these emotions. And we talked about the guidelines already. So because it was in order in the book. Okay. So we talked about emotional empowerment. We talked about all these things, so I don't have to go. Exercise hyper awareness on mediated channels. That was the one I didn't talk about, but we talked about that in chapter 2. So how do you minimize your debilitative emotions? Monitor your emotional reactions, note the activating event, record your self-talk, reappraise your irrational beliefs. Okay, so we know now what irrational beliefs are. Recording your self-talk, sometimes you can just stop and be like, listen to how I'm talking to myself right now. I mean, I would never talk to someone else like that. So it's just this idea of, can you bring awareness? A lot of your thinking habits are just habits, and not all of us are aware of our thinking habits, but just kind of like check your self-talk, right? How are you talking to yourself? All those things can really minimize debilitative emotions. Also, cognition, it's the mind's role in determining emotional states. So one is that your mind will immediately assign meaning and label the cause of an emotion, right? It's how your mind works. Your mind has to categorize everything and file it away into its file, right? So psychologist Philip Zimbardo found that we have the power to change interpretations of a causal event by employing this idea of reappraisal, which is just rethinking the meaning of emotionally charged events. So if you look on page, it's on 143, actually. So then you're going to go back to 143. Okay. All right. So in Zimbardo, he's a social scientist who talks about this process of reappraisal, right? So this idea of just being able to rethink the meaning of an emotionally charged event. I'll let you read it, but I think we can pretty much talk our way through it. And so just asking yourself, is the way I'm thinking about it accurate? Maybe checking in with someone else, okay? And maybe we have assigned some labels to a person or their actions that are maybe not accurate, okay? So we do have more control over our mind and our emotional states than we realize. So we can employ this process of reappraisal and rethink the meaning of, so we've got an emotionally charged event. Very often the meaning we assign to it gets assigned very fast. And when it does, it's usually because of past psychological history of some sort, patterns that were created in our life a long time ago. So we all need reappraisal. We all need to ask ourselves, is how I reacted appropriate for the situation, my emotional state? Not often, but I can recognize when I'm having an emotion that's too strong for the event. So maybe something happened and I'm really upset, really, 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 really emotionally charged. Reappraisal would be me rethinking it and asking myself, is this an appropriate strength of my reaction to the situation that happened? And so that's something that I've become more cognitive about, is understanding that sometimes my reactions to things are too strong for the actual event that happened. Here is, again, I'm going to let you click on that, test your emotional intelligence. It's a little quiz. And that brings us to the end of chapter 5. And I will stop recording now.